So I watched a video, it was a hangout with Kevin Logan and Steve Shives, and it brought up something that Steve Shives said that I wanted to talk about, because this is far from the first time that I'd heard it. And Kevin Logan had asked Steve effectively what his next goal would be, what he'd like to see happen in the future with regard to atheism, what progress he would like to see it make. And I mean, I suppose really they say atheism, but it isn't atheism. What kind of goal would it doesn't make sense, does it? A goal in terms of atheism, but perhaps in terms of anti-theism would have been a better way. That's really what we're talking about here, not atheism, I think. And he gave the answer. Shives gave the answer that I've heard so many times before. Starting in 2012 with all the free thought blogs and all the stuff that happened there in the Atheism Plus, which is he started talking about he wanted to see more diversity. There needs to be more diversity. We need to be engaging with people from different ethnic groups, especially. And I heard this at the time. And now I get the feeling that Shives may have been talking more in terms of particularly getting people at meetings and stuff like that. But I've heard this in the bigger context as well, right? That atheism itself, that too many atheists are white, the proportions are wrong, you know, and this is something that we need to be concerned about. We need to be getting it right. We need to get the right percentage of Pacific Islander atheists and African American atheists and all this kind of thing, so it matches. And to me, this just seems a bewildering, mind-blowing approach to take, given the circumstances in the United States. And the circumstances in the United States, Pew are the people that have the statistics on this. And if I had my computer rather than just this laptop, I'd drag you the stats up. Which is, it makes kind of depressing reading. If you went back 30 or 40 years and compared the situation in belief in God in the United Kingdom and the United States, you would see that the United States was a somewhat more God-fearing country. But if you see what's happened in the intervening years, that gap has just grown and belief in God has shrunk in the United Kingdom down to, well, the figure that I've got is 32% of the population say that they believe in God in the United Kingdom. In the United States, it stayed at about 90% mark, and it hasn't really shifted a great deal. There's been a little bit of progress, but very little. It seems really odd to me. If I was in that position and somebody said to me, what do you think our goals need to be, right? Because I'm presuming anti-theism. I'm presuming that this is atheism with a take on whether atheism is superior to theism, whether there is anything to be gained by making the world less religious, and the answer coming back is yes, right? That's what I'm presuming, otherwise the question doesn't mean anything. And can I suggest that your goal ought to be to turn that 10% that don't believe in a God into 20%, into 30%, into 40%, into 50%. And maybe when you've got it to 50%, maybe that's the time to start finessing and start picking at the corners of the statistics and whether it exactly matches the proportions of people in society. When you're only at 10%, right? When 10% of the fucking population don't believe in God, being concerned to make sure that it's exactly 7.24% of the population that are white and don't believe in God, and 1.26% of the population that are black and don't believe in God, and 0.48% of the population that are Asian and don't believe in God. I don't really think that's the time to be worrying about that. I would suggest, if it were up to me to be thinking about this thing, I'm not American, but if it were me, what I would say is, because your efforts are limited, right? You have limited resources, and if you start aiming at one particular group, that means you're not spending that time aiming it either generally at a wider audience or at another group. What I would say is I would go for the softest targets. I'd go for bums on seats. I'd go for the mass approach. I'd go for let's try and turn as many people in our direction as we can. And generally speaking, what that means is A, aiming for the largest demographic, and two, it means aiming for the people who are the softest targets, who are more likely to change. Now, in the United Kingdom, in actual fact, that's been white Protestants. It's been Anglicans. They've been the people that have lost their religion, and actually other groups have been much more resistant to change. It seems really perverse to me to have a situation in the United States where they're still pissing about. 90% of people still believe in God. And what they're saying is, let's divert some of our efforts into going after some of these groups that are going to be much harder to change, because we need to make sure that that 10%, this little fucking shitty 10% we've got, exactly matches the demographics of the wider society. Could I suggest you take a different approach and just go for the fucking easiest targets, go for the mass market, and start worrying about how it all breaks down somewhere down the line when you've actually fucking got somewhere? And if there's anybody there who's watching this and thinking, well, you're saying that, Noel, but this is really just kind of, you're only interested in white people and that's why you're saying it, right? There's a sort of racist undertone. Let me tell you that if you asked me that question about the United Kingdom, I would give you almost the entirely opposite answer. Why? I'll tell you why. Because with only 10% not believing in God, what that means is, when 72.4% of the population identify as white, that means that still the vast majority of white people in the United States can be targeted. They've still got 60% of the population who are white and are believing in God, even if everybody who doesn't believe in God is white. Right, so you've still got a big chunk to go at. That is not the case in the United Kingdom. The case in the United Kingdom is only 32% of people believe in God still. And the biggest gains have been made amongst the white population. And what that means is, actually you're getting down to the point where you're getting down more towards the bedrock, towards the people that are there and are unwilling to change. And actually, so those other ethnic groups in the United Kingdom, although statistically they are smaller, and so if you channel your efforts to them, you're channeling your efforts towards a small group. Statistically speaking, they have more religious adherence, right? So statistically speaking, as targets, they start to make a lot more sense. And maybe your efforts are better engaged at that point in starting to target some of these groups, despite the fact that they're smaller groups. And despite the fact that they tend to be more religious to begin with and maybe harder to convert, the fact that you've converted the bulk of all the white Protestants means that it now makes a lot more sense perhaps to stop targeting white Protestants. Indeed, in the United Kingdom, perhaps the story is that a lot of the white Protestants in the United Kingdom abandoned their religion with very, very little positive effort on anybody's part. It just happened. They just did it. They just abandoned it of their own accord. In a generational sense, you understand. These are each cohort being less religious than the last. It's not individual people changing their views. It's having children and bringing children up in an environment that allows those children to be less religious and have less God belief than the parents. So maybe the case in the United Kingdom, what the likes of Steve Shives is saying would be absolutely right. But I don't, for the United States, when you've got a situation there where only 10% of the fucking population don't believe in God, right? Why are you going to start fucking finessing and trying to, and our goal needs to be to make sure that this little 10% enclave we've got matches the populations in society. Honestly, you know, you're painting the little curlews and all the little details on your picture, and you haven't painted the fucking picture yet, is what I would say. You know, you're putting the cart before the horse on that one. Okay, interested to know what people have to say with regard to that. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.